The Beef School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pioneer Hybrid Canada. To find more Beef School episodes, go to beefschool.ca. Welcome to another episode of The Beef School here on Real Agriculture. I'm Kelvin Hepner, and for this episode we're focusing on grazing management, getting the most out of your pasture and rangeland. Our guest is Jonathan Bouw of Edie Creek Angus. They're just east of Winnipeg near Anola, Manitoba. And to begin, we talk about their approach to perennial pasture management.
We believe that giving plants as much rest as possible is the key to profitability for grass managers. And so we make a grazing plan in winter or spring, and we try and make sure there's enough paddocks on our rotation so that the whole place can get enough rest after we've grazed it. So we subdivide the pastures with electric fences, and we'll further subdivide them with poly wire to give them smaller paddocks and give a longer rest period. And also we can manage the consumption, the intake wise, in terms of if we've got a 10-acre paddock, we want to hit it a little harder, then we'll cut it into 2.5-acre pieces so that the cattle only get a part of that, and by the time they get to the end, they won't have started regrazing the stuff in the beginning, and that gives us a little more of a chance to control the intensity of the grazing. But the real key is to make sure that animal doesn't take a bite of that regrowing plant before the roots have recovered. So that's really the core principle that we try and follow, and we're just trying to give the plants as much rest as possible.
So what do you look for when you're deciding when to move them, and then how much rest the pasture needs?
It sort of depends on the land in terms of what we have available to us in forage resources. The field that we're standing on now, we're actually trying to use bale grazing to really boost the productivity and fertility of the soil. So it's kind of like cheating, but this field is just a low fertility field, and there's lots of bare ground. And so in order to increase the ground cover and the soil organic matter, we've done some bale grazing. And so on fields like that, before we get to bale grazing, we'll probably take almost all the forage off, like 80%, and leave only 20%, and there's not much litter left on the ground. But in some of our more healed up pastures, we were probably leaving about 50% of the forage behind. The cattle take the top 25-50%, and they trample on the rest and defecate on it, and that stuff goes to cover the soil and to feed the organisms in the soil. And we're seeing some really great results in terms of the biological life returning to some of our pastures because of that, and the forage production increasing as well, and all without the inputs of extra fertilizers. So we're glad for that.
So what would the ballpark timeline be in terms of how long a break you give a piece of ground?
Sure, yeah. We plan for 60 to 90 days depending on the stage of the growing season. So that's sort of the first rotation is typically a 60-day rotation, and then we try and give it 90 days of rest if we are going to get to it. So some pastures will get grazed twice, and some only 1.5 times, so different parts of it will get grazed different years twice, and the other parts will get rested. But that's what we're trying for.
How early do you turn your animals out in spring?
Yeah, we try and plan on feeding hay till about June 1st around here, just because we don't have much land for stockpile grazing. We'd love to have more, but with the resources we have, we try and turn them out June 1st, so it takes a little bit more hay to feeding, which is more expensive, but it allows us to get to our goals of grazing for about 6 months. We try and shoot for December 1st as our finish time. Last year we were a little bit impeded by the snow and -20 temperatures while the cows were still lactating, so we started our bale grazing program a little bit early, which we noticed in the middle of the winter when we were getting a lot closer to the end of our feed supply. So we fed a little bit of extra hay in a different spot, and then sent them out to bale grazing back in the spring where it was going to be too muddy to be driving around feeding with a tractor. So yeah, we shoot for December 1st as our finish time. I mean, the longer the better, and we're planting some annual crops to help extend our grazing season, but yeah, that's our goal.
Okay. parts of Western Canada this year looking like they're facing a potential drought scenario with dry conditions. You're certainly not too dry here at this point.
Yeah.
Of course, you can have more hay on hand or silage. That might be where corn silage comes into the picture for some producers across Western Canada. What do you do to mitigate the impact of drought and dryness here on Edie Creek, Angus?
Yeah, like you referenced, we're generally not very dry. We kind of get the rain that everybody else is praying for. It sort of stores up, and as soon as it breaks across that Red River, it thinks about falling on us again. So we're usually praying for it to stop. Yeah, I think one of the strategies we're thinking about doing is in the middle of the rotation, if we've got less grass coming on that regrowth for the second pass, then we'll probably stop the grazing train for a little while, and we'll feed some hay just to get our adequate recovery rest periods on the second pass of grazing. Yeah, that's the plan for now, and I think over time we'll become a more resilient grazing system by allowing the roots more recovery time, because they're going to be building organic matter, which stores more water per acre, and it'll help insulate us from the risks of drought in that way too.
Finally then, Jonathan, what would you say is the most common mistake that ranchers make in grazing management?
Yeah, I think not giving the grass enough time to recover is the biggest mistake that ranchers make. Continuous grazing is really hard. Like I was saying before, the little plant grows a little bit and then the cattle bite it off, and the roots die off every time the plant is harvested. And if they don't have enough time to recover to build a lot of root mass, then they're always just in a losing game where those roots get shorter and shorter and shorter. So then your infiltration rates are worse, and the organic matter levels go down, and your water storage capacity in your soil goes down. So I think a lot of people would benefit by having longer rest periods so that they can have better healthy plants, which eventually over time improves the soil. And yeah, it's a commitment to more intense management to do it that way, but I think the returns are there. And the best return on investment you can have is to plant fence posts and water infrastructure, because you got to pay for those up front, but they pay dividends over time, as opposed to fertilizing continuously grazed pasture. You'll see a benefit from that, but you're still struggling with the same symptoms all the time. It's like a band-aid instead of, dressing the wound instead of, yeah. So yeah, adding infrastructure of improving your pasture so that you can guarantee that plant gets a longer rest period is good. I mean, even rotational grazing, having 4 paddocks, it's better than continuous grazing, but it doesn't usually, you're back there in 3 weeks, something like that, before you get back to that pasture, and that plant hasn't had enough time to recover in 3 weeks. So if you can plan for 60 or 90 days, depending on the dryness of your environment, those plants are going to have a lot better chance to recover. They'll be healthier and more resilient in the face of drought or excess rainfall.
All right. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us for the Beef School, Jonathan.
You're welcome.